Thank you for joining us today. Today is a very special day for us at Kensington with our guests Matthew Lefferman and Dr. James Rouse. Dr. Lefferman, who lives in Southern California, has spent the last day assisting seniors and assisting others that need his attention and help in the Southern California fires. So I am absolutely thrilled that he was able to take some time today, and he will share with you really his commitment to the community also by doing this and making time for this webinar. Dr. Lefferman and Dr. James have amazing suggestions to bring in the new year with well thought out intentions. A copy of today's webinar will be delivered to your inbox in the next few days for you to share it with friends and family. Thank you, Kensington, for supporting these powerful educational events in our aging community. My father lived at Kensington in Northern California for 7.5 years. He was living with Alzheimer's disease. My mother's health was greatly impacted by his disease, and I did not want to lose both my parents. Kensington focuses on relationship-based care built on the foundation of their promise to love and care for your family as they do their own. It is programs such as the one you are attending now that are so important for those of us walking through a caregiver journey to hear from expert professionals on keeping us current with the latest advances in care, management, and treatment of conditions that affect seniors and their families. Thank you very much. On the East Coast, it's 6 o'clock, and on the West Coast, it's 3 o'clock. And in the middle of the country, you're somewhere between. So thank you. At the end of the program, we will have a conversation with questions submitted at registration and open up to a live Q&A. Please use this as an opportunity to submit questions as we enter 2025. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lefferman and Dr. James. Will you please share with the audience a little bit about yourself? Dr. James, can we start with you, please?
Absolutely. Hi, Susan, and hello, all. Gosh, what an honor it is to have this afternoon with everyone. And I know a lot of people are carrying a lot of things right now. So many things that we are doing our best to process about what's happening in California. And on top of that, all the things that the world is showing us about opportunities, how we have to grow as humans and grow as community. And I'm just so deeply grateful for Kensington, Susan, for helping to navigate, put us all together today. Because I think the thing I want to share with you all today, a little bit about me, is my passion for community. I love community. I love relationships. And I find more and more as I look at my world in medicine, the thing I'm continually struck by is how much vulnerability and connection and love play such a tremendous role in how it is that we navigate our lives, how purpose shows up in our lives, how everything from our immune system to our cognitive health to our cardiovascular well-being is connected to how it is that we choose to show up in the world. And today's really all about learning how do we learn to love ourselves more deeply and unconditionally. So I'm very excited to have this honor serving alongside of you, Susan, Kensington, and of course, my dear colleague, Dr. Matthew Lefferman. So that's my story, 30 years in integrated medicine, and deeply grateful and humbled to be here today.
And I will just share one thing, and that is that Dr. James and I just realized that we've known each other 10 years.
Look at that.
Don't look an age old, don't look a minute older.
Anyway, no, we do not.
It's been an incredible journey that I feel very grateful for and fortunate to know you. Dr. Lefferman, are you with us? We'll give him a minute. There you are.
All right, great.
There you are, our hero, hero.
Sorry about that. I was hiding. Thank you to Susan and thank you to the Kensington team. As a geriatric physician who specializes in going to assisted living communities, sometimes it can feel like working on an island unto myself. There isn't always the opportunity to collaborate and to engage with the doctor and the level of Dr. Rouse. And to share some of my thoughts and insights, both related to seniors and to the general world and the general community as far as health and wellness is concerned. And I think a subtitle to this talk could be "Man Plans and God Laughs." The age-old expression. And I think the events of the last 48 hours, and which will likely turn into weeks and months for those who are affected by the wildfires, just kind of underscores how we plan for certain things. We have goals and aspirations as the new year came about. I'm sure many have hopes and dreams of what they want to do for themselves, for their community, and for the world around them. But things can change on a dime, and I think the need to be adaptable, to need to have a plan B. And certainly as a physician, I see that, patients who, in a moment they can get sick and end up in the hospital and their lives can change. And so patients need to be prepared and families need to be prepared. And so I think that's important to be thinking about. And it's been a challenge, that with I'm happy to share more specifics about the fires, but people's lives have been changed very dramatically in an instant.
I'm going to ask both of you a question. We're going to talk about intentions today as opposed to resolution and the difference between those. Um, but look, can we talk? You mentioned Plan B. So going into 2025, can you both share a little bit about, what does Plan B look like? You have your community, you have your family, you have your friends, you have people that you work with. What does Plan B look like?
Um, I guess since I brought it up, I'll take that. I'll take that first. I mean, I think the general concept that you have your own personal goals, but you also have kind of community and societal goals, and you need that support and infrastructure to kind of be there to help you. There's only so much you can do on your own, and so I think that Plan B is knowing that you have support to help you through it. I think that's one important aspect. I think that as well, Plan B, I mean, while you might be stuck on personal goals, whether it's exercising more, weight loss, etc., maybe there's movement on on professional goals. So it's kind of like a tree, and if you're, or like a maze, if you're stuck in one area, you need to, try and find a way to create success in other avenues that can be meaningful for you.
Dr. James, I'm sure you have something to add.
Oh, I love what Matthew said, and just kind of a nice piece to go along with that. A dear friend, Carol Dweck, who's from Stanford, talks a lot about the difference between having a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. Carol's work's been dedicated for literally, gosh, almost 40 years now, looking at how, from a mental health perspective, from a cardiovascular health perspective, and just longevity, the people who go into each and every day as students versus someone who feels like it has to go just this way. Dr. Lefferman is living in a place today and seeing how things can change in an instant. I think all of us have had experiences here on this call and here in this experience together where something that we never thought could change like that. Carol says the people who find their way and navigate best have a student mindset. They continually go in each and every day as a student. I'm here to learn. I'm here to evolve. I'm here to grow. And when we give ourselves permission to be that humble and that vulnerable, we tend to navigate life healthfully. And I think we also tend to be inspirations for the people around us. A fixed mindset can be, I'm just stuck on plan A and I hope it works. That often doesn't work that way. As in my experience, I'm now in my early 60s. I've had so many beautiful disappointments where I thought I was right, and God had a much better idea for what it was that was going to be right for me. And here I am today witnessing a lot of things, as we all are, where people's plan B are right in front of them. So maybe we set an intention for today when we're sharing these ideas. Imagine yourself sitting in the front row of the best class of your life. It's you. You get a chance to be in the class of your life, and you get a chance to be a student of what makes you come alive. So today, let's learn about what makes us come alive. Let's have a beautiful plan B, and let that plan be the way in which we live openly as vulnerable humans who are here to continually evolve and become the person we love to be.
I actually love that. And we're going to go right into intention, but I just want to share two things with the audience. I got a phone call from Dr. Lefferman. I'm sure you were in your car, and he was driving to where he thought he could be helpful. Really, I think it was dark, it was windy, and it was a firestorm. But you didn't pause. You didn't think. You thought, I can be helpful. And I think sometimes the plan B and our intention to be helpful is we get caught up, exactly what Dr. James said. We get caught up in, oh, there's nothing I can do. What could I do? But you know what? There is something you can do. And if together as a community, we think about how we can do to support our community, you know, the whole is much greater than the individual parts. And so I love that we're kicking off this webinar, which will be a podcast into, how collectively, how our intentions can help the collective community. So let's go ahead and Dr. Lefferman, I'm going to start with you about really why set an intention and not a resolution? Everything is about New Year's resolution.
I read an interesting article this week about when we talk about New Year's resolutions, there's a gym, and I'm not sure exactly where it is, but they said that as of December, at the end, midnight on December 31st, their applications were closed. They were not accepting anybody new in the new year. And I think they've done this experiment in past years as well, because people join and they're there for a few weeks and then they end up dropping out, or they create a bad environment for those who are committed and who have been there the entire year. And I think it's an interesting business decision, and at the end of the day their current customers are happier, more and more committed. So we have this mark of January 1st to come up with a New Year's resolution, but it's really something we should be thinking about throughout the year. And maybe we're charged by January 1st, but we should find moments throughout the year, whether it's birthdays, whether it's anniversaries, to take a moment and reflect at those times on what you have in front of you and the positive they have in front of you. And one just last piece, as we're having this discussion about finding those resolutions and moving yourself forward. I mean, sometimes the answer is in front of us and we don't necessarily realize it. So I think it's just having your eyes open to that solution might be there, but you might be denying it.
Mm.
I'm going to add one thing. I'm going to let Dr. James jump in here, but it's so interesting because that to me goes all into your plan B, right? You may need to pivot, and you may need to have a new intention if some plan B presents itself and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? I got to figure this out. So you might be able to pivot your intention. So a rolling intention throughout the year, throughout life, I think is really good. And Dr. James?
Yeah, I love that. I think that idea of not just having January 1st be this thing, right? Because you said earlier, Susan, by sometime the 11th, the 15th of January, most people have already sort of, how should we say, dismounted. They've left their
Moved
resolution.
on.
They've moved on. And, it's interesting. There's some really interesting sort of, I'll call it objective chemistry or sort of neurochemistry around the power of intentions versus a resolution. And we know that when we set intentions, there tends to be a more galvanizing of a lot more of the neurochemistry of possibility and hope, parts of our brain associated with hope, parts of our brain associated with being more resourceful and not being so connected to a scarcity way in which our mind would say, well, it's all or nothing. And if I am not fully perfect, then I'm out. I think intentions have a little bit more grace, if I can say that. I think intentions are a little bit more graceful. They give us permission to be human. And as we move into the new year or a type of intention, things are going to change. We change. Our environment changes. And I think being malleable and knowing that we can recruit resources as we grow and evolve is a big difference between having an intention or having a resolution. I think resolutions tend to be black and white, and I think intentions tend to be beautifully gray.
So I'm going to share with you, I'll share with the audience. One of my intentions was to be more patient. And I altered my intention because I was like, I really want to be more patient because just let it go. Just let it
Mm.
go. Or as Mel Robbins would say, let them. Just be more patient. And then I was confronted with a situation where there was someone really angry and was not treating another person well. And I was like, this is not a time to be patient. And so I think the intentions can definitely, you're exactly right. They don't have to be so black and white. Um, so how do we get motivated to set an intention? Like how do we reflect on our life or our community? How do you go about that? Do you think about everything that's great about yourself and things you would need to work on, or what are your thoughts on that, Dr. Lefferman?
I mean, I think it's as a doctor who tries to dole out advice, uh, if the patient isn't open and receptive to receiving that advice, it's going to be extremely difficult. And so you can have lots of great ideas and options on the table, but what is really motivating that patient? And sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's social media, sometimes it's a family member. It's different in every case. Sometimes it's a financial need. And so, we're as doctors, we're here to guide. And I think an interesting discussion is like when you're giving, how to give advice. How do you help to guide someone down the path to better themselves? And it's challenging, and it's not one size fits all. And you might have a lot of great ideas, and you're like, that seems obvious. Like you said, like why isn't, you just have to jump in, but like you jump in, you're like, this seems obvious to, for me from my professional perspective, but you have to be really aware of the person that you're giving the advice to, their specific unique situation, and how they're receiving it, and is it the right time and place. Like I deal a fair amount with hospice patients. Patients are at the end of life, and there are studies regarding the intentions of how physicians should be presenting to families. Hey, your loved one is declining. Your loved one might be approaching the end of life, and an important one is to have the right setting, the right space, the right setting. Are you sitting down? Are you on eye level? Have you asked them, like, are you open to discussing mom's health? Are you open to discussing that things might be heading in a different direction? Maybe they are, and maybe they're not. So I think these are important to think about as we, especially as healthcare professionals, approach giving advice in the new year, and as people are asking us for advice.
I think that's so good because what I just heard, I think what the way we're talking about this is really for ourselves and our own intentions. There's many influencers out there, and an influencer might be an environment, right? An influencer might be a person that you're speaking with. Dr. James?
Yeah, I love everything that Matthew said. And particularly, he was mentioning different people you might have in your circle. And there's a lot of evidence that suggests that all too often we lose motivation when it's extrinsic, meaning that I'm doing it for reasons that's about how do I look, or more of egocentric motivation. And that's not to diminish, we need to have a healthy ego, but it turns out that intrinsic motivation really comes from a place where how will me making these evolved changes, me becoming more conscientious about certain practices in my healthcare and in my self care, then we start connecting to people that we love. If I make these changes, how's it going to benefit my partner, my spouse? If I make these changes, will I be more available to my grandchildren? When we start having intrinsic, which is basically reasons bigger than myself, we tend to find a lot more sustainable inspiration and motivation. I'm a huge fan of the Okinawans, who boast to have the longest, they have the greatest amount of centenarians anywhere in the world. They're a blue zone. They live on average well into their 90s and upwards into 100 years. Low incidence of heart disease, Alzheimer's disease. They have a philosophy called Ikigai, which is Ikigai, which means I have a reason to get up in the morning that's bigger than me. That's what Ikigai means. I have a reason to get up in the morning that's bigger than me. And they say that's a big part of why they have such low inflammatory diseases. They are thinking about others, and then they move and eat and live and spiritually kind of align their lives to be of benefit to others. And that's where they get their motivation. I think there's a lot to be learned in that.
I think we have an example right here with Dr. Lefferman. He didn't even think about himself. He thought about his community. And I just, my hat goes off to you. But it's interesting. So, do we write these down? I mean, how do we really encompass these, and how can we utilize these and get up in the morning and think about others besides our feet hurt or our back hurts or what are we going to do today? Anybody?
I mean, I'll just share that from research, those who write down their intentions, those who write down their goals are more successful at reaching those goals. And if it's weight loss, writing down your diet on a daily basis and what you're eating, if it's exercise, if it's writing down what you're doing on a daily basis to exercise. I mean, those who take those steps tend to be more successful. So I do think that there's a that component really adds a significant amount to the process.
Dr.
Yeah,
J.
I think, Dr. Lefferman said it perfectly. When you do write it down, there's a very different attention to it. And I think that not just even writing it down, they even say that put the time when you will do the thing. If you actually put the time next to it and that you're going to do it, your your availability to making good on your good intention, sort of closing the gap between intention and action, it goes up dramatically with time and place. So I think one of the great take homes for all of us today is you may have some beautiful intentions and they may be very like lofty and sort of aspirational, and then do the groundwork of writing down when and how, what time, and you will find yourself having a phenomenal greater opportunity to really close the gap.
Sounds like this intrinsic motivation could help everybody in the audience with the secret to longevity. Thoughts?
I believe that the secret to longevity, it's interesting, right? That idea of secret, or is it really the fact that we don't really want to tell the truth? And I think the truth is it's work, but not like work that becomes daunting. I find more and more the people that I look at, people I've worked with who managed to live and continue to live well into their 80s and 90s really vibrantly, they have a lightness about the way they treat themselves. They have definite practices of eating well and moving their body and have a spiritually rich life, but they also are their own best friends. I can't think we can overlook how much do we have an inner critic or an inner coach inside of us, someone who's rooting for us, someone who's loving on us, someone who was really saying, oh my gosh, good for you. Look at the way you're showing up today. That was a great way that you were honest and vulnerable versus, oh my gosh, you should be doing more. That wasn't quite enough. We need to really, really know that the inner critic is inflammatory. The inner critic will not, maybe not shorten our life, but certainly affect the depth and joy of our life. So if I can just suggest, how much are we willing to befriend ourselves if there's work to do there and really, really have a loving voice inside of us that's rooting for us? That can be one of the greatest ways we will manifest the secret and make it something that other people say, gosh, it's no secret. Look how much she loves herself. Look at the way she carries herself. She's just good energy to be around.
Dr. Leverman?
That's beautiful. With I have three kids, and I've coached each of them in different athletic endeavors, let's say, to varying degrees of success, which was extremely rewarding for me. Unfortunately, they've aged out now, so I'm somewhat retired. But before the start of baseball season every year, we had to take a class to improve your communication skills, and that you're being appropriate with the kids, and how to best support them. And a concept that they went over and that was impactful was to fill their bucket, to have this idea of filling their bucket. It's very easy to be critical. In baseball, like, why didn't you get down for that ground ball? But the idea was, if you're going to say something negative, before you do that, you have to fill the bucket. Let's say 3, 4 positive things first, so that you're not, the bucket isn't empty when you're giving that negative rebuke. And I think I like that idea. And I think from a personal perspective, you have to fill your bucket with different things, and whether it's your medical health, your financial health, having positive interpersonal relationships, be it sexual health, involved in a religious or spiritual community, or just being involved in community, giving back, charity, etc. I think these are all things that can help to fill that bucket. Again, if one isn't as successful you would like, or as engaging, then your bucket isn't quite as full.
Mm.
So I'm going to ask a question. Dr. James, you can weigh in on this. If my bucket's not full, how do I fill it? Like, what are the steps that I can do to pat myself on the back? Like, hey, you're doing good. What do you think?
Gosh, I'm immediately going to go to something that really struck me. This is a number of years ago. I was spending time in Kathmandu, Nepal. I was there on a climbing expedition, and also was learning how to meditate at the time. It's like, my gosh, almost 40 years ago. And I had the honor of attending my first Buddhist funeral. And it was striking in many ways. But one of the things I'll never forget was how the person who was leading the eulogy, and the room was full, it was a monastery, it was full of people honoring this person who had passed. And he said, I want you to look around the room right now. And this is the mark of a good life. And I kind of looked around, and then he said, people your life well. People your life well. Decorate your life with a room full of beautiful, loving human beings, and you will fill your life the way it's intended to be filled. I don't know, Susan, if that answers your question, but I think that way in which Matthew was just saying, you look around your life, and part of the environmental medicine that we can bring into our life, how are we decorating it? How intentionally do we place loving human beings who are rooting for us all around us? There's many ways that we can fill our bucket: getting a walk first thing in the morning, saying our prayers, doing meditation, eating a clean, healthy diet. All of these are wonderful ways that we fill our bucket. And I think the one that really I'm coming back to more and more, and maybe it's because I'm just in an age of my life where I'm really seeing the preciousness of family. I feel community is the ultimate bucket filler. Be engaged with people. Be engaged with your community. If you have someone in your life that you love, be emphatic about telling them how much you love them. That statement that I learned when I was 20 years old, people your life well, and at the end of your life, if you've done that, you'll have a decorative room of a bunch of people who will be the mark of how well you lived your life. That to me is the primary bucket filling, if you will.
Tell me how communication plays into that, because you have to tell people they're filling your bucket, correct?
Yeah, I think vulnerability lets in light. And right out of the gate, I'm at a point in my life where I am so beautifully unashamed of asking for help. I'm beautifully unashamed of saying I'm lonely. I'm beautifully unashamed of telling my mom, who's well into her 80s, how much I'm going to miss her when she goes.
Mm-hmm.
I tell her that every day. My mom and I FaceTime 7 days a week. Why? Because that's my role, to be vulnerable to her that way. I think we get so proud, and we get too proud, we edge people out. I think the goal is to evolve to agree we're inviting everyone in, and also being beautifully selective to invite in people who make you feel good about yourself. There's a lot of talk about detoxification this time of the year. I hope I can say this without being offensive. we may need to detoxify our community sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
People who are not necessarily kind, people who not necessarily make us feel possible. That's also part of detoxification. Go around, look at your community. Who stays in? Who maybe time to leave, if you will. Lovingly, but time to leave.
I'm going to share one thing, and then I'd love Dr. Lefferman's thoughts on that. I did a webinar with people that actually have Alzheimer's, and I had three different individuals that I was talking to. And one of the individuals said that when they were diagnosed and entering into this horrible journey and this challenge, her sister left, just didn't hear from her sister. A couple of her friends left. Her son said, "Can I help you? Can let's buy a townhome and let's live together or a duplex or whatever." And she said it was amazing to her, the people that just became overwhelmed with that. And I think I couldn't agree with you more. There are certain people in our circle of life, our circle of love, that we need to nurture. And there's other things, if it doesn't feel good, or if it's not, no relationship is 50-50. We know that. 60-40, 70-30. But when it becomes 85-15, you need to revisit that. Like, why am I giving? Why am I trying so hard at this? I just don't, get the satisfaction back. But Dr. Lefferman, I'm going to let you respond, please.
I mean, the thought that comes to my mind is that a little bit of light can dispel a lot of darkness, which is to say that, if to you see someone who's down, et cetera, like you don't need to do significant things to help them to feel better. And so in reaching out to someone, small things can really, can make a difference. And related to that, my wife and I have both lost parents and have been through the mourning process, and that's kind of a maybe the most poignant opportunity to experience that, to experience the kindness from others, and it can be awkward. It can be very difficult and awkward if you're on the other end wanting to help someone. And it's very easy to just say, well, what can I do to help? Or tell me what I can do to help. And that's not, I mean, I would say from, personally and based on, what I've read and studies I've read, like that's not, not effective. Like find something, take the time to think of something meaningful or take an actual step, whether it's dropping off food or, calling them saying I'm going to the market and how can I help, or dropping off a book for them or dropping off a plant. So, I think it's knowing the significant impact you can have with a small step, but then also not to burden someone with having to come up with thoughts and ideas. Like you should just take that step. And yes, might not be right all the time, but I think it will be impactful knowing that the thought was there and the meaning and intention was there to help.
I couldn't agree more. Dr. James, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that availability to, I'm a big believer self-care is true primary care. And then we have to ask ourselves the difficult questions. What is it myself needs to care more? Who do I need in my circle to help me to be reminded of that care? And how do I actually make myself available to being present enough to see who others in my life I can be uplifting? I think there's a lot around this idea of emotional contagion, especially this time of the year, right? Because sometimes self-care may feel self-indulgent sometimes, but there's a lot of research that really speaks to this idea that how we do show up and the way in which we lead our lives, when it's done from an authentic place, a beautiful place where we know we're doing this for reasons bigger than ourselves and wanting to be of benefit, we become contagious. There's a lot about this idea that, we always say that energy, someone has good energy and we'll go, well, their energy is contagious. Well, that's one of the things we get an opportunity to do, particularly this time of the year when there's, I'll call it like in the quantum field, a lot of people are thinking about intentions right now. It's early January. It's a lot of things happening that are really kind of in our favor to lean into. And I think the more that we are not afraid to put down our guard and really, really invite in that level of connection and community so we don't feel alone in these aspirational ideas of making changes and growing. And then I love the idea of being heroic in a way that you really, really do something that I think is so beautifully uncommon these days. Be present enough to feel when you know someone's going through something. I think it's so easy to deflect. We're living in fractals more and more. The way the internet works, social media works, it's so hard to be present. So when you actually really look someone in the eye and you really, really give your undivided presence to someone, that is a heroic level of healing energy being exchanged. And I think, Dr. Matthew and I, we talk a lot about this with our patients, I know every day. And Susan, you and I have been friends for a decade. We know how heroic it is these days to be that person who's not afraid to be fully present. We know what it can do for people. And it does a lot for us to be that person. So maybe one of the intentions we can set as a community, I know Kensington is so devoted to this. Choose to be present in ways that's beautifully uncommon. Be iconoclastic in that way. Break down the norm of being fragmented and lost and be fully that person who decides to lean in that deeply that you have that beautiful, uncomfortable moment where you're like, ooh, this person's really here. And then you breathe and you stay with it. Something beautiful happens there.
Dr. Lefferman, you didn't think about that and give yourself all the roadblocks why not to get in your car last night. You could have thought of 10 reasons why I can't do this or why I shouldn't do this or why I'm fearful of doing this, but you didn't. You just went. And I actually love what you said about grieving with your parents, the loss of your parents. I'm going to give an example. I had a friend that was experiencing a tragedy, and I said to my daughter, I said, I'm going to call him. And my daughter said, oh, you need to give them some space. And I said, you know what? They can pick up the phone or not. And they picked up the phone and they said, thank you so much for calling. Everyone thinks I need space. And what I really need is you. And I also, the other thing that Dr. Lefferman and the audience share this with everyone, because everybody says, what help do you need? How can I help? How do you know how you need help? You're in the middle of this horrible emotional, challenge. You don't know how you need help. So just drop something off. Drop off a card, or whatever, or send your son over to mow their lawn. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but I love that. And that's an intention that I think everybody should take away today. And what Dr. James said, be a little more vulnerable. It might not be right, but it's an offer. I love that. Anything else on that, Dr. James or Dr. Lefferman?
Well, I just want Dr. Rouse to know that people are listening, including myself. And I remember from the last webinar that we did, he talked about the benefit of the 2-minute hug. So I've tried to incorporate that as much as possible at home. 2 minutes is a long time, I have to say, but there's that as well to keep in mind.
Uh, Matthew, I love you for that because I know my wife, we've been together 32 years. And sometimes I'm in there like maybe a minute, 5 minute, 10 seconds. She's starting to squirm and I'm just going,
Yeah,
I'm like, no, you can't dismount. It's all about
yeah.
oxytocin. It's all,
My
yeah,
my daughter my daughter's great with it, but yeah.
Yeah, but we're talking about intention. When you give a 2-minute hug, that's real.
Mm.
And 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 if it feels uncomfortable, maybe it does for a little bit, but then it really feels good. And I pride myself that people say you're a great hugger. And I actually hug people I just meet. I said I'm a hugger. And you can kind of read whether someone's a hugger or not, but when you have that hug, it just releases all that, like, okay, here we are now. And the 2-minute hug. Let's all practice
Right.
that. And actually the 2-minute hug and some of the intentions we're speaking about, the vulnerability and whatever intention you want to write down in journal. Let's talk a little bit about, does that really provide me? We're talking about, not just 2025, but do these intentions I'm writing down and things that I really want to do, does that set foundational pearls like an oyster, is what one of you said in our meeting before. Do you build on these things? Tell us about that, Dr. Lefferman.
Um, uh, I mean, I think yes, you have to have if you're like if you said to someone, I have this heavy backpack, can you carry it a mile for me? They might say no. But if you say, can you carry it, to the end of the block? And then once they get to the end of the block, you say, oh, can you just carry it one more block? Then they'll be like, okay. And then one more block, and eventually they're there, and they've taken it the mile that you wanted them to take it. So I think it's very helpful to break things up into smaller chunks. And Dr. Rouse says the soul, he talks about soul bites, and small little, what are little things that you can be doing to move the needle. I know for myself, if I'm trying to get myself into better shape or at a better weight that I'd like to be, that first step can be quite daunting. And to think, I feel like I need to lose 10 pounds. But if I say, in the next month I want to lose 2 pounds, that's something that's feasible and reasonable, and it won't cause anxiety day to day, along the way. I mean, I want to, and I think from a medical perspective as well, I deal a lot with seniors, and I think my general approach is less is more, medications and monitoring, maybe referrals, and there can be a sense that you have to do some, there are all these things you have to do, whether it's taking a cholesterol medication, being on, blood pressure medications, and checking blood pressure multiple times a day. But really, how is that adding, what is the benefit of at the end of the day? And it can cause a lot of anxiety thinking, living from blood pressure to blood pressure, where it's stable all the time, or there are minor variations. And so, like, what are the things that you can let go, and allow yourself to be more and have space for other things along the way.
So that was one of our questions from the audience. How do you overcome obstacles? Dr. James, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, Dr. Matthew did a wonderful job about sort of that incremental movement. You know, no question, human beings are momentum people, right? We're momentum creatures. I think one of the most beautiful thing about having incremental changes versus trying to have this giant, sweeping, high arching goal is that momentum happens in incremental places, meaning that mentally, emotionally, and physically, having something first thing in the morning that gets inertia out of the way, so to speak. Something as simple, and there's so much good data these days about circadian rhythm, which is basically our 24-hour clock, and how much of a role that plays in things like positivity and optimism and mental health, as well as physiological well-being. The more we're connected to the circadian clock, the more we help our bodies to manage inflammation. We help with our cells and our mitochondria and all the ways in which we create energy. So I love the idea of just picking one thing first thing in the morning, something that is just enough different that you are witnessing yourself doing something incrementally more difficult or challenging, or at least outside of what you normally would do. When we place one thing that we set an intention for, and then we are a witness to seeing us follow through, there is a momentum that's happening mentally, emotionally, and physically that literally, almost, if you will, one good thing begets the next good thing. That is really a lot of how we as human beings perform at our best. Have one thing that we do well, be a witness to it, say good for me, and then we tend to be looking for the next good thing we can do. And over the course of a few days and course of a few months, we see ourselves having 3, 7, 11 new things that we've implemented because we began with the one thing. There's so much wonderful research that speaks to having a morning ritual that sets you up in a place that's unusual, somewhat uncomfortable, and you're fully present to see yourself follow through. What it does for your confidence, what it does for your physiology is truly life-changing over time. So I love what, Dr. Matthew, Susan, the both of you, I think what today really is a testimony to. I think all too often we caught up in the drama of the new year. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be over the top. Why couldn't it be something that we are being a witness to, something that is amazing and beautiful just for us? We're fully present for it. And over time, we see ourselves bringing in new things that are just for us. Eventually, the people that love you are going to pay attention and say, there's something different about you. You're going to say, like, what did you do? Well, you know what I did 2 weeks ago? I got up with the sun. I went outside. I did a sun salutation on my front lawn. The neighbors were totally berserk. They couldn't believe what I was doing. They were talking about me. They brought in the HOA. You know what? Give them something to talk about. I think that we're all trying to be so politically correct with not making too much attention to ourselves. Let's be the kind of people that people go, oh my God, I want what she's having. I want the way Dr. Matthews steps out in the world and is wonderfully vulnerable. I think it's time that we have somewhat of a social activism based on taking such impeccable care of ourselves. It wakes up the slumber party that's happening around us, and people start to believe, I want that too. Sorry if I'm just, I feel very passionate about this.
And I think it's great and it's contagious, but I think that's a song. Give them something to talk about. And oh,
It's Bonnie Raitt. It's
Mhm.
by the way, if you do that, you're going to find out who's in your inner circle. So it's a
yes, we will.
great way to purge. Really, really great way to purge. Um, we had a question come in, and I'll start with Dr. Lefferman. And I think that we're talking about this now, and I love that 2025. It's going to be a great year. Oh my God, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? What are you going to? It just how how can we manage anxiety and stress better as a person um, in 2025 or for the rest of our lives? Dr. Lefferman, anything about stress and anxiety?
I mean, as my from my last answer, I think starting with non-medicinal prescriptions that can, that can help you. And I think by starting with the world around you, I was reading recently about some research being done some research by the name of Jill Litt at the University of Boulder in Colorado, and the idea is the benefit of being out in nature and what as far as your health and helping with loneliness and your medical health and your spiritual health and giving actual social prescriptions to people. Like you need to go outside, sit amongst trees for 10 minutes a day and the benefit that this can have even beyond medicine. So I think you need to look at the world around you and get out of your box. We're now more and more years out of COVID where we were so locked up, and to that end, that mindset is very difficult to break. And you see, like as there are changes in the world, it's very quick to retreat back into their cocoons that they were told they had to be in, which was unfortunately detrimental. I patients who are dying of COVID, but also people who are dying of loneliness and being in the room. So get out in the world, see what's around you, look at nature, look at other people. Go to a restaurant and do a nice cafe and do people watching and see what's around there, and maybe that will motivate you and inspire you, and cause hopefully less anxiety.
Well, that's a webinar we're going to do on solo aging, but Dr. James has a tree house, so I'm going to let him
Wow.
comment on that.
Oh gosh, I do have a treehouse, and it's to what Dr. Lepperman was speaking to. The research on forest bathing, and that's what Dr. Joel Litt was speaking to, and Dr. Lepperman was referring to. What happens in nature is that we actually breathe again. We literally, when we're walking in nature, when we're outdoors, we tend to start to engage our diaphragm again. A big part of what drives anxiety and what really stress triggers for us is shallow breathing. We stop to fully breathe. And in that, we start to increase more cortisol, the stress hormone, which increases our anxiety, augments our stress levels. I think the beauty is, and Matthew, one of the many things I love and appreciate about you is your first line of defense. It's always the most beautiful things that require no real prescription other than the prescription to look at what it is that you could be doing right now. You could be breathing possibly differently right now. You could probably step outside and take a good look at the sky or find a bush or, it's interesting. There was another study that was done. I'm just going to go ahead and riff on what Matthew was saying. Hugging trees was a joke way back when I was a kid. Guess what? There is research that speaks to the fact that getting really close to a tree and potentially even, holding on to one and hugging one even offers that much more benefit. I think the world is beautiful right now. We have so much good technology. Medicine is advancing in so many fabulous ways. And at the same time, there's this parallel path of how these beautiful, natural, innate good can be paralleling right alongside of this. I think there's a lot to be said for what maybe we can make a declaration for this year. Look at the pharmacy that's open 24/7. It's nature. She's always open. She gives herself permission to actually go out and fill your prescription, which is mindfulness, which is breathing, which is the engagement of something bigger than yourself. A study was done called Taking an Awe Walk, AWE, awe, and they said prescription to go outside and be surprised by the beauty that you are looking for versus not that all of a sudden just happened. No, you head outdoors with the intention to find something beautiful that you didn't notice before. That has a profound impact on our mental and emotional well-being. Awe walks. Let's schedule in the prescription for an awe walk while we're outdoors and just see what type of beautiful thing may happen by surprise.
And I'm going to add to that with the 2-minute hug of a tree. I have an oak tree in Northern California that I hug all the time, and I look up and I'm just awesome. It's awesome. I mean, it's been around for hundreds of years. It's the most beautiful thing, and that's where I actually speak to my father who passed away, is in my tree hug with my oak tree. But we're going to end with that. And I am just absolutely, I just can't thank both of you enough. And what a treat for the audience and what a treat for all the people they share this webinar with. And we will be turning this into a podcast. So we'll let you know about that. But thank you so much. And Dr. Lefferman, thank you for what you're doing for the community in Southern California. And Dr. James did one time I did a webinar with him and he came in and he was just all rustled. And I said, "What have you been doing?" He goes, "I'm fighting fires here in Colorado with my shovel." And he was on the front lines because they needed help creating defensible space. So thank you both for what you do and thank you for your commitment. And we'll do this again in a couple months.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Susan.
everybody.
Thank you,
Be
Kensington.
safe.
Lots of love, everyone. Happy New Year. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Dr. Matthew.